Good morning, everyone. This is the IIR and East Daily joint webinar um, brought to you by IIR and East Daily. My name is Jack Weixel, and with me is Maria Sanchez. We are here on this lovely Thursday morning to answer all your questions about natural gas and how it's going to behave over the next 18 months. So I'm going to start in about a minute. We're going to give folks some time to gather in the virtual meeting room here. But while you guys are waiting, let's go ahead and get the advertorial stuff out of the way. So we have some QR codes for a couple of things that you guys can get access to. The IIR Energy Natural Gas Market Intelligence Suite is what we're going to be talking about a lot today. This is basically a super, high-speed nomination flow data service that IIR offers. We really like it. We use it at East Daily ourselves, and it has become a great tool for us to be current on real-time market conditions. So click on that QR code. You'll get an email that talks about, that basically indicates your interest in learning more. For East Daily, we've got the Daily Note, which is a free publication Monday through Friday. And if you click on that QR code, you'll get enrolled in that. And then we have a product that you can actually buy online called our Macro S&D, which is one of our forward-looking lower 48 macro S&D forecasts. So get in on that, and I'll just let this sit for about 10 seconds before we go on here. And yeah. All right. Well, by now it looks like the room is getting pretty full out there. So let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to talk about over the next 30 or 40 minutes or so. All right. So title of today's agenda. Obviously, natural gas markets are becoming increasingly volatile. While we've had some price downturn over the past over the summer, we've also seen a recent uptick in prices, particularly for the winter strip. So we're going to talk about that and how you can use our tools to basically be more predictive. Here's how the thing is going to go. We'll look at production. We'll look at it in real time and then give you a forecast of what we think is going to happen through 2025. And then we're going to take a look at demand. Maria's got some great data on data centers and also power and LNG driving this sector. In fact, the 4 pictures that you see on the right, I used Google's Gemini platform to generate these images. For each one, if all the power I used to generate those images in total were about 0.12 cubic foot of gas to generate those images. So about the size of a volleyball, which is kind of fun. So get out there, use those data centers, and support the natural gas industry if you can. Finally, we'll take a look at storage and price. With the IIR data, you can look at select storage facilities, which is very important in being predictive. And then I'll take a look at some of the stuff that we actually put in our macro S&D, which helps shape our price forecast. We'll be looking at the surplus and/or deficit to storage 5-year average and how that's going to basically evolve over the next, say year or so. First, talking about volatility, the epicenter of the volatility supercycle that we're in is the Permian. So these are kind of broad strokes before we get into the details here. Over the past 6 years, basically what we've seen is production and pipeline egress capacity is effectively doubled across gas, crude, and NGLs. When you double capacity like that, you get a lot bigger swings in price. All these molecules are racing to a higher price market, whether it be the Gulf Coast, whether it be SoCal, whether it be Mexico. Changes in those markets are going to have outsized effects on the price at Waha. More recently, just this week, when Matterhorn started flowing. We saw changes at Houston Ship Channel. We saw an increase in the Waha price, but now that price has actually come down, actually in the past 2 days, due to some maintenance. So price stability is not something that is necessarily permanent once you open up a new egress capacity. Maria's going to talk about what she's seen on Matterhorn from a live perspective here in a minute. But yeah, basically, constraints in one area, for example, gas lead to constraints in other areas. And so understanding all three commodities is a key to basically, being a very thorough energy analyst. So, we look at crude oil production. There's our forecast, right? We think that this Matterhorn in-service date will lead to some gradual crude growth as they fill up that pipeline with new associated gas production. Speaking of lower 48 dry gas production, Matterhorn is going to inject about a total of 2.5 BCF a day of new production over the course of 2025. Not going to come all at once, but it will come soon enough. And then lastly, NGL production, we believe, will also increase. Permian is going to drive a lot of propane growth, maybe not so much ethane in the near term, but this is also a growing and important market to monitor. Now, getting back to gas, because we talked about all commodities here, I'm going to hand things over to Maria. Maria is a highly decorated natural gas analyst, obviously working with IIR. She and I spent a lot of time at Bentech Energy together back in the day. So I'll let her take over from here for a little bit, and then I'll hop back on.
Very good. Thank you, Jack. Yes. So now at IRR, and we're complementing here with its daily. This data, as many of you know, it helps you to keep you informed of what's happening in the market today. Many of the original state sources of data, they are very good, but they are a little bit lag, and that's where we can fill up the gap. Yes, IRR has been in the market for over 4 years with we call it boots in the ground, with bottoms up approach, and that's why the quality of the data is so strong. So going back to the natural gas market, and specifically, we are starting with production, kind of how Jack mentioned in the agenda. We have done a lot of work in identifying these productions. As you know, this is interstate pipeline data that is publicly available. The value of the data is in the metadata, right? When you add, what type of meters these are, operators, locations, and this is where the quality of the data we are proud of. As you can see in the chart to the right, we are showing you natural gas production sample in the area by region, and then we have a gross up at the U.S. level. Our sample for U.S. production is 80% at the at the U.S., but as many of you are familiarized with this data, many regions like the Northeast, Gulf of Mexico, we see basically 100%. Of the activity, which is very valuable when we're doing then forward looking. And it's also a good way to see that it's a very trust source of the data. Then specifically what we are seeing this year so far is we have seen some declines. Part of that, of course, or mainly driven by the low price environment that we have seen persistently. Specifically, most recently, starting in August, we started to see some production cuts, and that's what you can, see very clearly in the chart. Some of operators that announced these production cuts were Chesapeake, Equitrans, and Coterra. Year to date, I was kind of looking at some historically, and that's what the chart goes back to 2019. For the first time, if we look at January through September, we have observed production declines by 1 BCF a day compared to 2023. So for the first time, we're seeing that decline. As Jack mentioned, we're seeing that changing in the future. And Matterhorn, as I have on the bottom left of the slide, is one new pipeline that allows takeaway capacity of the Permian. Right now, it is a 2.5 BCF a day pipeline, but we're seeing about 600,000. And very importantly, this is something that we started seeing this production day one. So these volumes started October 1st, and as you can see, we can see them already. So let's take a deeper look at these August declines in production. So specifically, we observe a lot of that in the Appalachian. Every time, however, in the fourth quarter, we see production increases as operators have the flexibility in the region to take advantage of higher prices in the winter. Now, this August, and that's what we see on the left-hand right, and I have those circles there. Every year we see that bump in the fourth quarter. Now, specifically back to these production cuts that we observed in August, we can, highlight some of the Pennsylvania top operators, which is the right-hand side chart. And you can see Equitrans is one of the main ones that we have seen these production cuts. And again, they were very open during earnings calls to mention this and announce them. Now, however, because of some improvements in production, they announced that they're partially going to reinstate some of these production cuts. So some of this production is coming back as soon as October and November. We haven't seen much yet, but this is something that we can definitely see as soon as it happens. Now, I also wanted to, include this offshore production dashboard. So at IRR, we, have the database, which you can get, via FTP in many ways. But if we also provide some dashboards that it is for data that is readily available, so you don't have to build anything. And because, we have Hurricane Milton approaching the Gulf of Mexico. Well, it's in the Gulf of Mexico, but farther south than where a lot of the operations are. But we can see in the image there how the impacts to all Gulf of Mexico by barrel in early this year in September. So you can see a very steep decline. A lot of the shutdowns were precautionary, and most of it came back. However, then Helen hit us late in September, and we finally came back, right, to the close to 2 BCF a day, basically production that we see in the offshore of Mexico. As you can see in this dashboard, everything is bottoms up approach. So you can see pipeline level data, but in the chart you can see it's dots because it's meters that we see at each one of the interconnects from these offshore platforms. Now back to Milton, which is kind of what we have in front of us. Because of where it's the formation is happening, we're not expecting most declines. I will say less than what we're seeing in Helen. So so far through today, we remain at 1.9 BCF a day production, even when we have seen some announcements. Because remember, at IRR, it's not just this flow data. We have facilities and we have contacts at a lot of these platforms, as well as any industrial power facilities. And a lot of these offshore platforms have announced precautionary shutdowns, but no impact to gas production so far. And if we see something, it will probably be a little bit less than what we saw with Helen. And we're expecting to fully recover.
That's a very cool interface, Maria. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think between that production tool and then also being able to see what's going to happen at like the Tampa Electric Big Bend Energy Center.
The power impact. Yes.
Power impact will be huge. So anyway, obviously this is a very fluid situation that we're in here on the day. So let's shift gears a little bit and look at our outlook, right? We saw in July, right, that production hit 101.2 BCF. This is actually a little bit off from the 103 that it averaged in June, right? Those 2 months and the ensuing kind of rebound in production earlier this summer was a little bit too much too soon. Production has since declined down to about 100 BCF, but it is going to ramp up, we believe, in the fourth quarter. So more specifically, as Matterhorn continues to increase production, We'll also see some seasonal increase in the Northeast. But a lot of this Q4 25 increase in November and December of this year is going to be marginally weather dependent. And you can say that for all of calendar year 25 as well. It starts with a normal winter, which is something that we'll get into. Where are we going to see this growth specifically in 25? We'll see some Northeast increases there, utilizing the MVP Southgate expansion and ramping for that. Regional energy access could also increase some production levels in the Northeast. Haynesville will be driven largely by outgrowth and output from the Plaquemines facility that will also begin to ramp up. Obviously, it's already taking first gas, which you can see in the IRR flow data. And then the Permian we'll see that shift. So major growth corridors right here. Permian should be above 18 BCF a day by February 25. To kind of put that in perspective, just a few short years ago in 22, it was only at 14 BCF. So a lot of growth there. We continue to see it in 2025. Average production for 2025 will be 105.4, which is roughly a 3.1 BCF increase over average production in 2024. Let's switch gears again and talk about demand. I'm going to lead into some really detailed stuff that Maria's got for us. This is our summer 25 forecast of power burn, and you can see it comes in at roughly the same level. We think that it'll be on the order of about 0.03 BCF a day higher than the Cal 24 average. The reason being for that is continued load growth and continued, reliance on gas-fired power burn by ISOs and RTOs across the country. We think longer term through the end of the decade that due to data center demand, the industry could use potentially 20 gigawatts, potentially 25 gigawatts of combined cycle gas units. In our long-term forecast, we look at a lot of different things. One of the main constraints there are ISO and RTO tie-in queues. The length of time being spent in those queues, just due to the total number of power projects has increased from about 2 years to over 4 years now, which is slowing things down. There is 79 gigawatts of gas in there, which if they all went through by 2030 would be about 6.5 BCF a day of demand. We've hedged that number a little bit down to about 2.5 BCF a day growth, and you can kind of see by the heat map down here below where a lot of those energy needs are going to be across the country. And again, Maria has a much more detailed map that we'll look at in just a minute. Let's talk about LNG. The pause is dead. Long live the pause, right? So basically what we've learned since a Louisiana Circuit Court judge in July basically undid DOE's pause is that the definition of expeditious review is a little thorny, right? Certainly means different things to different people, and certainly some of those people in DC maybe have a stranger view of what expeditious really means. More recently, the DOE did award a non-FTA export permit to Altamira, right? The rub here is that the permit is only valid for 5 years, and New Fortress can reapply in 2. Typically, the DOE would usually do is award a non-FTA permit through the year ending 2050. The reason behind this was that basically what DOE says that short-term international and macro effects on LNG remain uncertain in the short to medium term. Doesn't sound like it had much to do with environmental considerations, which was their original reasoning for the pause. But again, we'll see what happens as some of these other projects work through the machinery at DC going forward. in the graph, we have kind of 4 categories of projects here. So we have existing, which is the kind of the regular blue color here. And then we have FID projects, which is the dark blue. And then the lighter blue is expected FID projects that do have their non-FTA approval. The sum of those through 2030 basically comes to a little bit under probably 28, I think that's 28 BCF a day of export capacity. Assuming those are 90% utilized, that's going to equate to about 26 BCF a day of actual export, right? The missing category here is this is pink block, right? Under DOE review, but does not have FID and does not have that FTA permit yet. So the mission for these guys, which includes Commonwealth, CP2, and Sabine Pass 3, is next 9 months are pretty crucial, right? So typical LNG facility build cycle takes about 4.5 years, right? So if you want to get your project in by 2030, you really have to have your FID, your DOE non-FTA permit, and boots on the ground by kind of the summer to late summer of 2025. So over the next 9 months or so, we're going to be watching developments very carefully because what would happen is you get an additional 4 BCF a day of export capacities if those projects get their affairs in order by the middle of summer. So kind of an important development. We'll bring it the news here from East Daily as we get it. So that's the situation there. Now let's switch over and look at this stuff from a live perspective.
Right. So again, the pipeline data really allows you to monitor what's happening in the market right now, basically. So I did include these on the left-hand side, the main chart of LNG feed gas by facility. We basically see close to 100% of the activity. We are definitely under the peak that we saw at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. But definitely it's something that the 7 facilities that are operating, we can see. And then also the Golden Pass and Plaquemines, for example, we already see pipeline data that we can start seeing. Some of that activity is still not considered feed gas because it goes into storage or into some plants. It's pipeline. But it are the pipelines that are going to feed the LNG facilities as well. But it's definitely a great source because you can see, monitor this activity on a regular basis. On the right-hand side of the screen, I wanted to kind of point out some of also of the things that you can monitor on a regular basis with the data. Starting in September, Cove Point went into their annual maintenance. If you see the chart for Cove Point, you can see that there is always a gap there. Every year there is annual maintenance on the facility. It lasts close to 30 days. Currently, it's down. It started on September 20th. It's going to end on October 10th. This information, you can see it in the flow data, but also we have pipeline notices that you can also receive on a regular, on a daily basis, multiple times a day, actually. So at any time you see any movements in the pipeline data, you can tie it back to the pipeline notices to figure out, is this maintenance? Is something being announced by the pipeline? And it's, a very valuable tool as well.
So we'll see on Thursday whether that comes back.
Yes, yeah. It's coming back this week.
Yep.
Yeah. And then moving into data centers, which is another big source of demand. I know it is more power demand, but it's definitely correlated with the gas market as renewables are not going to be able to keep up with everything or batteries. We again at IRR we keep all the we have the plants and units level of all these data centers, similar to what we do with power industrials and all facilities. We're currently tracking about 24 operational gigabytes of capacity, and a lot more coming. So this is going to represent about a 9% increase. In the map here, it's good to see how all the facilities. We do definitely have Arizona, some in near San Antonio we see a lot, and also up east. This heat map also shows it's very similar to the previous one. It's not the same. We had existing here. These are all the existing currently operational data centers, and these are the ones proposed over the next through 2030. So you can see a lot here in Arizona, again, San Antonio area, and then up in the Mid-Con and farther east. This is something, it's not just an area, every one of these, you can find the lat and long name, operator, capital spending, it's also a lot of information that you can find in our database. And then additionally, we offer this dashboard, again, because sometimes it is a lot of data. I think the data, having all the details is, good, but at the end of the day, we want to be like, how much, what is the total? How do we quantify this? What does it mean, right? And I know East Daily is more for the forward-looking, but here we'll provide you what is available that we can see and what's proposed. So as I mentioned, operationally, and here is by balancing authority, this is the total. But if we had this dashboard live, we could go into each tab and look at each one of the balancing authorities. So 24 gigabytes of operational, 45 more planned, and then some engineering and under construction. We have different status based on where they're going, but it's definitely very significant. And this is only US. Globally, we also track data centers. They're happening worldwide. And this is very important because it's not growing demand just for the US, but also internationally. And that means more demand also for our LNG exports. And then now moving into a storage, I wanted to kind of show some of the information that is available through our data. Again, it's very good supported for, the storage at the end of the day, right? It's gonna say where is supply and demand. It says very clear the picture for where prices are and where they're heading based on your forecast. So right now, based on EIA data, of course, as you know, there is a weekly number, and this is something where the data from the pipeline, since we see inventories or daily injection withdrawals, over 70% is visible in the facilities data. It can be monitored, again, daily if you're a trader. I know that's big. And I used to forecast that weekly storage number every week. So on a regional basis, we are in all regions are above last year and also above the 5-year average. The mountain region definitely stands out. However, it's only about 8% of the total capacity. So it is significant for the region. At the US level, doesn't have as much of an impact. And that's why as we move forward, we're seeing prices recovering further than where they are right now. I wanted to show some specific fields, facilities, so storage fields, because it's very good to visualize. What does that mean when you say this matters? In the mountain region, as I mentioned, there are a lot above average, and it's because we have had a couple of winters. This is back to 2020. We have had some summers where injections have been stronger, while the winters, because we have had a couple of mild winters, the draws total have been a lot smaller. So that's a lot of what's pushing those inventories to be higher. Up west, more Pacific, missed storage. Note how last winter, it didn't go as far south as previous years as we have seen. So right now, it stands actually, closer to what last year, but it has pushed a lot of the gas have had to stay there or be consumed and not put into storage because, basically running out of crude. Also SoCal, very dramatic, everything we have seen there. That's what we have, prices have been very weak. And then in contrast, I also wanted to show, kind of national fuel inventory. This is a depleted reservoir. And as you can see, it hasn't seen as much of an impact, definitely not going as deep because this is related to how cold the winters are. So definitely when winters are milder, they don't go as far, low in inventories. But in general, you see more of the seasonality. Now I'll let moving forward? I know Jack is going to talk about what are we expecting, what's being proposed, and then what does it mean to prices?
Sure. Yeah. So, interestingly enough, right, if you looked at some of those select storage facilities that Maria had, right, you would think, oh, we're not using it, as much to withdraw. We don't need as much, storage, right? Actually, the opposite is very much true, particularly in the South Central region of the United States, right? Overall, working gas storage capacity has declined about 60 BCF from 5 years ago. A lot of this through reclassification into base gas. But the storage market is alive and well, and it's actually there's a great need for flexible salt dome storage. And I'll tell you why in a second. Overall, here we monitor, basically new storage, either brownfield expansions or greenfield new builds here. So overall, and these are all Texas and Louisiana projects, by the way, there's proposals out there for about 130 BCF of new storage, 106 BCF of salt, and we think this is a good start. In particular, some of the greenfield projects on here between Fresh and Black Bayou would add a ton of flexibility to the market. Of course, Black Bayou had their open season back in June. The Fresh facilities open season is now ongoing through October 24th. So make sure to pay close attention to announcements from either of those companies with the results of their open seasons. We think that there should be strong interest for both. The reason why, well, flexibility. So you have all this increase in demand driven by LNG, largely, some power demand, obviously, too. But you don't necessarily have the ability to store all that LNG demand gas if facilities were to go offline, or down for maintenance, or even worse, down to a storm. So let's take a theoretical situation here, right? Let's say that Milton was headed for Port Arthur instead of Tampa, right? Or I guess we're kind of in the middle of it now. So anyway, if this was happening, what's happening now is happening over Port Arthur, the industry would be in a lot of trouble, right? So demonstrated peak capacity in South Central is about 1.4 TCF. Typically, the region fills to about 1.2 or 1.25 or so at the end of the season. This implies that there's an average about 150 BCF of flexibility on those systems, right? Also, you note that when the time when hurricanes hit is also important because you have less ability to basically inject during those periods. Think about the blowing into a balloon that's already full, right? You can't get as much air in there or gas into the salt dome facilities if you were to have a major disruption in demand. So things are tight and getting tighter, right? Should Louisiana be home to more than 20 BCF of LNG offtake by 2030, it would only take 7 days of demand destruction from LNG facilities to basically operationally handicap South Central storage. Then you're talking shut-ins. You're talking about where can this production even possibly go if you had a storm. This is just the LNG demand portion of it. It doesn't even count the power or industrial facilities that can't take gas. Currently, there is, by this month, right? Louisiana has about 13 days of operational flexibility. So again, if Milton were, in the middle of Port Arthur, and it is, such a powerful storm, you could be in, trouble quick, right? October 25, so next year, right? You get down to about 11 days of operational flexibility. So certainly during the duration of this hurricane season, and next year's hurricane season, we're going to be watching this development. Again, those storage expansions, particularly the salts, are necessary, not only for security of supply, but also to essentially act as shelters when storm events do happen. So they're important. They're highly coveted. I think this is also reflected in the fact that the rates at existing storage facilities in the region, it's becoming more expensive to store your gas because of the scarcity of capacity. So we'll watch this development going forward. We're certainly going to use Maria's facility level data to do that because it is valuable and an ongoing development. Winter season. Let's flip back to kind of more of the macro S&D type stuff here. So here's our expectation for supply and for demand for the winter, right? We are assuming a 10-year normal winter in this scenario here, right? It's kind of what we have to do, right? As you can see, the past 2 winters have been anything but normal. So for winter 24-25, if you have 2.5 BCF a day of incremental rescom demand due to a normal weather, then you're going to take about 2.2 TCF of gas out of the ground over the course of the winter, leaving you with a little under 1.7 TCF in there. That's a normal winter, right? We're going to get back to this in a second. Talking about surpluses, right? Part of the reason why price has been so low over calendar year 24 is because of high surplus. You can see these red dots, the blue dots from last winter, really just kind of an exacerbated scenario there where we had over nearly 680 BCF above the 5-year average after that weak winter, right? More recently, the surplus fell below 300 BCF the week ending September 6th. It fell under 200 BCF just last week. So it's been a while, especially been since last January that we have seen storage surplus under 200 BCF. We've seen injection rates skew down below the 5-year average rate this summer. What we do believe is that that's going to take inventories down to about 185 BCF by the end of October. We're right around this level right now at I think 177 BCF. So we see that kind of remaining, and the price has responded. Price has gone up. At least cash prices have gone up by over $1. I think Henry got into the 280s last week too. So call it $1.50 almost, right? So stronger, the stronger you get kind of out on this curve, right? As the surplus shrinks, the higher price that you will realize, right? By the end of winter 24-25, we expect that the surplus could shrink down to about 41 BCF, and even perhaps flip into deficit mode for a few short months here. But again, this is highly dependent on weather. So let's just talk about end of season real quick here. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this. Basically, what we're looking at is an end of season of around 38.97. Once you get over 4 TCF, you do start to see some of those operational issues, regardless of where the facility is located. But it's interesting. We got a shot at 3,900, and the last time storage ended up in that scenario was in October 2020. And we all remember what was going on in March of 2020 and the ensuing months here. So even without a persistent global pandemic in 24, we're faced with a very similar scenario, just basically due to warm winters and overproduction. Speaking of winters, I told you we were going to get back to this slide, right? That 2.2 TCF that we're talking about withdrawing through the end of basically March 25 will not happen if we have a winter that looks like either one of these pink guys here, right? If you get rid of that 2.5 BCF a day of incremental demand, you end up with a storage surplus that looks somewhat like this. So nearly 400 BCF more that remains in storage, does not get withdrawn because it was not needed, because it was not cold. This excludes any reaction by producers to bring down production, but in a sense, these are essentially your guardrails for what to expect over the course of the winter. It has a big impact on price as well. So I'm going to think about something to mull over. I guess as of what I've kind of looked at for long-term weather forecasts here, about 50% of forecasters are predicting that we're going to have a normal winter. but the other 50 are thinking, oh, we're going to have another one, which is not good for certainly producers. Consumers can, maybe have a, have something to say about that, right? But in any case, this is what we're looking at. This is the environment that sets up for this summer. Let's go to prices here. So in this graph, basically plotting the surplus versus the price here, right? Persistent production. We've now actually we're at 90 weeks here versus the 5-year average. We do see an instance, given normal weather, where we could slip down below 0, right? We think Henry Hub's going to average about 324 per calendar year, 25. And we actually have winter 24 prices about 12 cents higher than the current forward curve. Should weather pan out this winter and you get to a 41 BCF surplus by March, you've got emerging LNG over the course of summer 2025, and we could see prices closer to $4 by the time we get out of winter. Yeah. So that is our time.
Yes.
Yeah. Our contact information is right here. Of course, those QR codes, use them. Yeah, we're available to take questions. Any parting messages, Maria?
Well, I think it's important, looking back, because it's right now we're even saying the upside is just a normal winter. I mean, what if we have a cold winter? So there is even more upside, right? To that case, of course, weather is hard to predict, but we have seen colder winters many times before. So I think that will be something, interesting to watch over the next few months.
Yep, and live, not only live production levels, but live demand on the IR platform, and we'll continue to update our outlooks going forward. So thank you very much for spending the time with us. If you do have any questions, you can write them in the chat, and we will answer them. So feel free to fire away if you're still online with us, and I appreciate your time. And thank you.